we'll go ahead and do the roll.
All right. Kirsten Besega.
Here.
Patrice McCarthy.
Here.
Margaret Gustafson.
Here.
Dr. Rowe is not here yet. Okay. Sarah Larford Simmons said she would not be in attendance, and Dr. Ritchie also has a previous engagement. All right.
And I'm here.
Yeah,
as
I'm
well.
sorry. Of course. Oh, Chair Rodriguez, excuse me. Yes, you are here.
Thank you. The next is the approval of the minutes. I did want to make a recommendation to amend the minutes to reflect that Patrice was not absent at the last meeting, but unable to attend due to technical difficulties. There was an absolute heroic effort made to try to get on, and that did not work out. So we are glad that she's on now. Thank you.
I would move to accept the minutes as amended.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right.
Second.
All in favor. We'll do a quick, seeing no, is there any objection to that? Seeing no objection, they will be approved as amended. All right. Next on the agenda is I think we have to approve the minutes. No, we did that already. Approval of the agenda. We just need a quick approval of the agenda. Is there any amendment to the agenda? All right, seeing no amendment to the agenda, it is approved as written, and we will get right into the meat and potatoes of this work. So I'm going to hand this off to Kristen, and we have lots of material. What material would you like us to begin with, Kristen?
Yeah, I can actually just share my screen if that makes it easier. That way it's all up together. But the first document I'm going to is recommended allow to sunset. And I'll pull it up on my screen as well. That way we're all looking at the same thing at the same time.
Thank you.
In just a moment, because apparently if you open a PDF, it won't share your screen with Teams, and I have to put it in a tab. 1 second.
I can open it if you like.
That would be great.
Okay.
So recommended allow to sunset.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So in Public Act 2441, there were a number of provisions that are recommended or that are sunset as of July 1st, 2026. Because these were all, for the most part, just dealing with provisional educator certificate, many of these are no longer going to be offered. So since provisional educator certificates will not be offered, that's your 442, 447, 452. In this document, it shows the full text of each of these pieces of language that we'd be allowing to sunset. For 401C, so if you want to start scrolling down.
Sure.
For 401C, we had some discussion on last time, and essentially the question was there anybody that still met this? Anybody that was still employed at the same private special education facility since September 1, 1980 that does not have an appropriate certificate. And I had asked the staff of the certification department to make sure that nobody fell into this category. So 401C, I believe we can allow to let sunset because no one, as far as we know, has been continuously employed by the same private special education facility since 1980. If we keep scrolling. The certificate of eligibility, this one hasn't been offered in many years. So this language we would suggest to allow to sunset because it's no longer offered. So this section of the regulations was defining what the provisional educator certificate was and how you could go about getting it. So 415 has all become obsolete because of the new law. So because we're no longer offering provisional educator certificate, we suggest repeal or allowing 415 to sunset. Okay, and then we're going to get a bunch in a row that are all the same thing. So because this same identical language was posted over and over and over for almost every type of endorsement you could have, this one is allowing the provisional educator certificate for elementary teaching to sunset. And if you go to the next one, it looks almost identical, except this is for foreign language instruction at the elementary level. And the next one is for middle grades, the provisional educator certificate. So many of the ones that are in the rest of this list are just allowing to sunset all the provisional educator certificate parts of the regulations. Right? So this is provisional educator certificate for secondary academic, provisional educator certificate. Oh, did I put it secondary academic twice? Oh, there we go. Teaching English to speakers of other languages. Secondary academic is 52. Keep going. Teaching English to speakers of other language is 73. Yep. Bilingual education, provisional educator certificate. Same thing, remedial reading and remedial language. Single subject special education, provisional educator certificate. Same thing again, but for comprehensive special education. And this last one, originally there was a little discussion about this one because it looks like it's saying professional educator certificate, but it's really about the provisional teaching certificate, which has been discontinued for years. So if you look at what this language is saying under A, this is saying that this is for a person who has completed 30 school months of successful teaching under the provisional teaching certificate, which is no longer offered. So I recommend that 609 also be allowed to sunset. Do I have any questions on this document? Okay. Okay, in which case I think for order of operations, instead of making a motion to move this right now, what I would suggest is we go all the way to the end and we move everything together with amendments.
Just
So
as a
the
reminder
next,
for folks who joined a little bit late, I'll be stepping away for a moment and Kristen will be taking over until I'm able to return. It should be about 5 or so minutes, but I'll be back shortly.
so if we have no questions on the allow to sunset, let's go to recommended for repeal. Okay, so what happens is Public Act 2441 makes this big giant list of regulations to repeal. Some of them we felt needed to be kept. Like the list we just went through, a lot of them are perfectly good to sunset, and we just wanted to do our due diligence, read through every one, make sure there wasn't anything we were missing, right? But then as I was going through the regulations, I was like, well, what about all these other regulations that were also about provisional educator certificates that weren't slated for repeal? Because provisional educator certificate will no longer be offered, all of the sections listed are also going to be obsolete. So I believe these are ones that are good to repeal. You'll notice that they follow the exact same pattern as before. So all the ones on this list are the provisional educator certificate requirements for a number of different subjects. So early childhoods, library media specialists, agriculture, health occupations, trade and industrial. And just so that you can see that, you know, we are doing our due diligence and reading through all of them. Let's just look at the first 3 or 4. So if you could scroll down to the first page. So for instance, for early childhood education, it's complete BEST, complete 30 months of successful teaching, and then having taught at the Board of Education successfully. If we scroll back down to the next one, it's those provisional educator requirements. So it's BEST, 30 months of teaching, and successful teaching at a Board of Education. So all of the ones in this list are the same pattern. So it's provisional, that's become obsolete, it's BEST, it's 30 months, it's having taught at a Board of Education. So do we feel like we need to go through this whole list for each one? I'm seeing a head shake.
I do not.
I am seeing some head shakes. All right, do I have any questions on why I wanted to recommend these to sunset? Perfect. We are moving right along, which is good because some of the later ones do have edits and things that I would like us to spend more time on. Let's go next to recommend to reinstate as written. Okay, so before the meeting, Kaylin helpfully pointed out that 445 should not be in this packet because we've already discussed 445. So when I make a motion for this, I'm going to make the motion to amend this to not have 445. We actually already voted on 445 last week to reinstate with an amendment of like where the middle grade certificate would be valid. Right? Now, why keeping the middle grade certificate language is important is because even if, that's not an endorsement that Connecticut is necessarily training educators in, when people come in from other states, let's say I'm coming in from New York and I'm middle grade certified in New York. When I come into Connecticut, I want to have like the middle grades pathway. Like I want that to be there. I see a hand from Lauren. You're on mute.
I just want to clarify that we do have a couple of institutions that do prepare candidates for the middle grades certification in Connecticut.
Ooh, thank you. Can you let me know which one? So in my notes, I can.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put it in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you. So if we could scroll down to 444. The recommendation is to reinstate this. And why we would want to reinstate it is because the Public Act listed this one to sunset. So as of July 1st, it will go away. But since we want middle grades certificates to continue and people will still be becoming endorsed in middle grades, this language needs to stay in the regulations so that it's saying when you need to have a middle grade certificate. Do I have any questions on 444?
No, I just want to bring up that Lauren put in the chat, those programs are approved to lead to middle grade certification.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so Albertus Magnus and University of Bridgeport. Great. So 445 we can skip because we have already discussed it at our previous meeting. And last one, 608. I think 608 we may have also discussed at a previous meeting, but you guys can correct me if I'm wrong here. So the reason that I think that 608 should be reinstated is because it was listed to repeal. But if we repeal this, this means if you have people with certificates who are no longer offered, they might no longer have a certification. 608 allows them to continue with their endorsement for as long as their certificate remains in effect.
So Kristen, you're recommending that we support this, not repeal it, correct? I just want to make sure.
Yes, to reinstate it, to bring it back and make sure that, you know, we're keeping as many people in the field who are qualified to teach in the classroom. Julianne?
I just wanted to clarify. So for example, someone who has an elementary 013, without this, they lose their certification because we no longer issue 013. So it's just letting people, if I have a previously issued endorsement, I haven't allowed it to lapse, I can keep it. And so I think that was completely unintentional. They weren't thinking about how they change.
Thank you. All right, in which case we're on to document 4. And here's where there's changes. Here's where I think that their draft language or places that we can make some positive change, right? So if you open up, it's the draft regulations for ad hoc. And you know what I was trying to do with it is I was reading, there's like a state guideline on how to write regulations and how to edit regulations. And in that document, they use brackets to mean subtractions and then underlines to mean additions. So I'm sorry, this one is harder to read than the previous weeks where it was like red and green and all nice and highlighted. This one's a little harder to read because I wanted to use the form that we'll eventually need to be using when we submit these as like final drafts. So what do you, before we get super far into the language here, what do we think about presentation? I'm eventually going to need to present this to our board and potentially to the State Board of Ed Policy Committee and the State Board of Education. Do we think that it should be in the form that I did before, where like taking things out was strike throughs in red and additions were bold in red? Or is it okay to leave it in this format right here? Catherine.
Go ahead, Catherine.
Thank you. So I really have a question. I know you're asking a question, so I'm answering a question with a question. It was my understanding with the support that the overall board would be receiving, legal support, that entity would support us in rewriting or writing regulations. I'm not sure if it's the mission or the goal of this body to write the regulations, but rather to make recommendations or suggestions on whether these existing regulations are going to be sunset, repealed, and making recommendations on next steps. Please correct me. I see Jen's back on the call on the next steps. It's a big process. You're asking about the presentation. I'm not sure that
Mhm.
you need to, that's a lot of work for you, Kristen.
It's actually not that bad. I thought it was going to be bad, but because everything's electronic, you can like copy paste and then it's like highlighting, and edit.
Yeah, so shouldn't we have somebody that's their area of
So
expertise
this
doing that
particular
work?
group was, I'm sorry, say again. I feel like you were cut off a little bit there. Maybe it's just my internet.
My question is it the purview of this body to rewrite the regulations or to make recommendations on what should be repealed and what our suggestions on for next steps? Right? I
Sure,
feel
it
like
is.
I feel like it's not the purview of this body to write the regulations, and with the new supports that the board will be getting, would that not be the role of that entity to help formulate the regulation?
Yeah, so it is the role of this group to go through the regulations, and they decided to make recommendations of rewriting them or adding to them or adjusting them or updating them or modernizing them to then present to the board for that final decision and review for them. So we're not starting from scratch, which I think was one of the kind of the first things that we had talked about as part of that. And my understanding is that Kristen has kind of put these through to Emma through CEA and having a conversation with Emma at CEA as part of this. So I do believe that Emma is aware of these and has been providing some technical guidance to Kristen as we move through this. All right, Julianne?
So my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong, but so this is our recommendation. We're not officially saying we're going to adopt this. We're recommending, or you're recommending this is what it should say, and then someone who has the legal expertise would be like, yes, or oh, I need to fix this wording because that's not right legally. But this is essentially the recommendation. Is that correct?
Correct. It'll be the recommendation that the regulations make to the board, and the board obviously would have the final say if they want to amend anything in here or adjust anything. And if they would need additional counsel on that, then that would be the Emmas of the world to help with that additional part of it. But we didn't want to start from scratch on them, which I think is what we kind of identified in the very first regulations meeting. And that's why we started with the sunsetting, and for Kristen to go ahead, and I think Kristen volunteered to go ahead and start. So we weren't starting from scratch, I think was the language that she had used at that time. So yeah, I think we're in a good space, and we have 2 batches that are already moving forward to the board based on our recommendations for the board to kind of go through as well. In terms of the look of things, the first grade teacher in me loves the red strike throughs and the green new language. I'm wondering if we present it in that format and then maybe allow the technical advisory of Emma to kind of formulate it into what it should look like legally, so that maybe visually it's better for folks to kind of navigate. I do know there's accessibility concerns that have been brought up in the past, and I don't know like what that means in terms of documentation that we share amongst the board and what colors can be used or not be used and that kind of thing. So that would be a Karen question for sure.
Jennifer, do you think you can, for the purpose of all the attendees, just explain who Emma is and how she'll be supporting our work?
Sure, absolutely. Emma is a lawyer from, and this information went out to the board, but for those who are not a part of the board, maybe haven't heard this information yet. Emma is a lawyer from the Potomac Group. She has been offered as legal assistant from 4 organizations that are on the board currently. Catherine Rowe is part of one of those organizations. CEA, AFT, and CAPS offered to provide legal assistance and a facilitator, and Emma is that person. Myself and the vice chair met with Emma earlier this week, and she kind of like did an introduction to who she was. So we had some background prior to the Monday meeting. where we'll be discussing the offer letter with the board. She comes with 25 years of experience. She has written legislation and regulations at the national level as well as state levels. She comes highly recommended, and she is going to be helping us with all things legislative and regulatory to ensure that we can get everything through. No one on the board of us 16 has, I think maybe with the exception of Patrice, has that legal background within that and that expertise. And so she is going to be assisting us with that work. So yes, that's a great question. Thank you, Catherine. All right. So in terms of the way it looks, I think it's one of those things where we kind of have to get used to. It's a matter of, do we want to present it to the board with like the strike throughs and the green new language for ease of viewing? And then like the final product would be, you know, formatted in what would be regulatory format or legislative format. What are the thoughts of the board or of the ad hoc? Patrice?
I think for ease of understanding of the board, most of whom don't look at the formal legislative formatting on a regular basis, I think it would probably be easier if we're able to do it in the color and with the strikeouts.
With the idea that when we motion to accept these and move these forward, that it would be translated into, you know, the appropriate format for
Exact.
regulations or
Yes.
legislation. Yeah. Agreed. Margaret, go ahead.
I concur with Patrice. I think it'll be much faster in discussion to be able to just have that visual.
Got it. Catherine?
Thank you. So my question is, Kristen, when you met with Emma, what was her technical recommendations for when we revise these in order to submit it to the larger group? What was her recommendation?
Yeah, so it's something that we talked about, and we were kind of going back and forth because I was like, well, one way makes it easier to see, but the other way is the way that we have to submit it in any ways. So we settled on showing it this way just to see how it goes. But Emma's been great in what I've like talked with her so far, just because she's seen so many different regulations in other places, whereas I've only seen these in like for the past 4 weeks in detail. So it's nice getting someone else's perspective on like how does this normally go in other places. She was the one that kind of pointed me to like, you know, states normally have guides to how they write regulations. So no, it's been great. But I did have a question that might help answer Catherine's question. So Catherine, you had asked something like, you know, is it the purview of the board to be going through the regulations in this way? But for the certification staff, my understanding is you guys tried to put through the same bilingual language we're going to go through in a minute, put it through last year as a change to regulations, and they said, wait for the cert board to come on board. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes, we were trying to make an amendment to a current regulation, thinking maybe in special session or next year, but it was told to us to go through this board for that. Any modifications or changing to regulations regarding certification.
Right. Which, you know, for a lot of the other in the regulations writing handbook that I was reading through, a lot of it's talking about how the state agency writes their own regulations, but this law has kind of taken it out of the state agency's hands. And when they did try to put forward a regulatory change, they were told no, to wait for this board. So I think now it seems like it has to be in our purview if they're not letting the agency do it themselves. But I do have that as one of the items on this page.
And the Public Act 2441 does provide the purview of the board to write regulations and legislation as they relate to certification and preparation. I think it was section 11. I'm not positive, don't quote me on that, but there is a portion of it that I have in a presentation that'll happen on Monday. That speaks to that as part of our work. I think Catherine's question was whether or not we had the purview as an ad hoc, and we do, because that was the work that was assigned to this group to do, so that we weren't starting from scratch as a board, and we had a group that could work more nimbly and meet more flexibly and more often to get through as many of these regulations as humanly possible in between each monthly board meeting. All right, so next, Julianne, go ahead.
I just wanted to confirm that in the past, the certification office, we would actually, like, if you're used to seeing the working with regulations, we're used to the whole bracket and underline, but if you're not used to seeing them, you're like, what does that mean? And we used to actually write them up. We would put proposed language, and then the legislative office would actually make any final tweaks that they felt like something needed to be done. And now they've said, we want the board to do these proposals, and so that does make sense that the idea is that you propose it and it can still be tweaked. This isn't the final item being moved forward, but it like is to so that the ad hoc can say, here's our recommendation, and then the group can say, oh yeah, I like that, or oh, change this, and then at some point the whole thing moves forward once it's agreed upon. That's my understanding.
All right. So for the interest of time, we're at 3:46. I think we have still a couple of documents to go through. Am I correct? Okay, so why don't we go ahead to Kristen and then Catherine. I see Kristen's hand up first and then Catherine second.
Just wanted to point out, someone in the chat has said someone who is registered late is waiting to get a link. So did someone register late and they're just waiting to get an email?
No, actually, someone provided the link to that person. So I'm not sure where that
okay.
person is, but that
No,
was
somebody.
sent to me. I'm sorry?
I'm not supposed to peek, but somebody registered after the meeting started and he's waiting for the link.
Does he have an email address or?
In the meantime, while we unpack that, can I just, in the interest of time, can I go ahead and, I just wanted to say, so thank you very much, Kristen. I was unaware that you were working with Emma to cultivate the language to input here. So that's good information to know. Is there any way that we would know in advance, like what the work is that's going into this? So say, for example, just for transparency, when people are meeting with other entities to try to cultivate these regulations and such, just just in the interest of transparency. I wouldn't have asked the question had I known you were working with Emma. That's the bottom line.
Sure. I think that when our board or our ad hoc, I think Kristen had volunteered to do the work, and once she did the work, I think she kind of tapped into any, like we approved Kristen to start doing the work, and she tapped into any legal resources that she had at her disposal via CEA or what have you, and began that work there. But it was our ad hoc that said, yes, go ahead and get started. And then I believe CEA had reached out to Emma to help provide some of that technical assistance, but Kristen's been doing the heavy lift of that work. But our ad hoc approved Kristen to get started on that, and she used whatever resources she could kind of find to get that work started for us and to move us forward. Kristen, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Yes. So I know the rest of the board just got notification that Emma's kind of coming on board to help us with legal things because, at the beginning, our very first meeting in November, there were like the two lawyers that came in and they're like, we can't give the board legal advice and we can't help you with, setting up the Constitution and bylaws. So when we got here, I did a bunch, as Jen said, a bunch of heavy lifting on my own for the ones that were easy. The State Department of Education made a big list of like regulations that would be pretty straightforward for us to go through right away. So that I was perfectly fine taking care of on my own. And when I have like legal questions, I'll ask, but it's not like there's tons of legal questions I have. Actually, mostly what I have is policy questions. So for instance, the highlighted items on this document are kind of like policy questions. Like, do we want to do these particular things? Because other things that are just bringing it up to date with the statute, that's not too bad. I can figure that out. So if we're all set, I can start going through this document. We would just need to zoom in so it's nice and easy to read.
Maybe on page 1, if you could zoom in there on part 2, I think it says at the top. So right now we're saying all 3 pages.
So Chris has asked in the chat, is there already or will there be a tracker that CEPC board members, not on the ad hoc and members of the public, can know where regulations slated for repeal are in the process? I actually have the document. I've made it myself. It's pretty big, but if we think that is something that would be good to share, I can probably not at the next board meeting because we've already sent out the materials, but I can show people by like sharing my screen what it looks like at the next board meeting. I just don't have that file up on my documents right now. All right, so Karen, can you zoom in so we can read page 1? Let me see if I can pull it up on mine. Is everyone able to see my screen at this point?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you guys. Thank you, Karen. I know there's a lot of documents in here. Okay, so this document would be items or regulations that were set to repeal that I think that they should be reinstated, but just with some edits. Now, we've actually already talked about 401 before, but when we originally talked about 401A, there was a question on whether subsection C was going to be repealed. So if we're recommending subsection C to be repealed, then we do need to edit subsection A. So even though we have already taken a vote on 401, I am bringing it back because now that we know no one has continuously been employed since 1980, then this subsection C should be removed from A. For the certificate types, this was just a bringing this language up to date with what we're actually being offered. So we no longer offer provisional educator certificates. We no longer offer certificate of eligibility. That updates where the certificates are described. And so here's where we see the 411 would be taken out and replaced with 412. 417 would be replaced with 414. And that was just conforming to the statute. So a lot of the changes that are just conformed to statute are going to be pretty straightforward. The temporary 90-day certificate is for candidates that are coming out of the state ARC program. The state ARC program is, because of their slightly shortened timeline, they don't, or at least they didn't always have student teaching for the full amount of time. Because student teaching wasn't for a full amount of time, these candidates would get a temporary 90-day certificate. And then while they were employed by their first Board of Education, at the end of that 90 days, then that employing agent would recommend certification for them. So with this one, I was trying to bring it up to statute. So changing out concept and praxis 1 for praxis core, taking out connect, replacing it with actful and the other appropriate tests. This 3.0 B on a scale of 4.0 is the current requirements for getting into the ARC program. Oh, up here with the middle grades education, why I suggested removing it is because ARC doesn't currently have a middle grades education program that they're doing, and therefore they don't have anyone looking for a middle grades temporary 90-day certificate. One of the other changes I think would make sense, just for making more durable regulations that can last longer, is that the best and team, whichever name it is, this induction program for new teachers that we're doing, we should have some sort of language that's describing the induction program for new teachers without necessarily calling it best or team, in case in the future that process changes. I see in the chat from Lauren that Charter Oak State College also has an ARC program that obtains the temporary 90-day certificate. My question is, for the Charter Oak State graduates, do they also have the shortened student teaching time? Is that why they do? Okay. Do I have any questions so far? All right. So I mentioned this at the last meeting where I was trying to get a little discussion on what to do with DSAP. For the durational shortage area permits, the previous regulations only had 2 reissuances. Then, because of around the pandemic time, it was increased to 3 and the regulation wasn't changed. But now I'm suggesting 4 times with 1 additional reissuance with evidence of hardship. And essentially, this is going to make it a little bit easier for people who are on a DSAP where they don't need to be filing hardship paperwork for multiple years in a row, right? If they have issues that come up, like they filed for a DSAP, but they didn't use it this year because they became pregnant and weren't working that year, or they weren't able to get all their coursework done because it wasn't offered at their EPP or some other thing. We kind of had a discussion of all the difficult things that could come up that would cause someone to need more time with their durational shortage area permit. The highlights are in here because I had a question about this 9 credit hour deferral. So the idea with subsection 1 here is that while you're getting a DSAP, you're supposed to still be taking courses in pursuit going towards finishing your program. And so the current language says the department may defer during the first or second reissuance for good cause the 9 semester hours of credit, provided that the deferral is requested in writing by the employer and is accompanied by sufficient evidence to justify the request. I was looking at this and well, now if we're reissuing it up to 4 times, do we want to increase it to 4 times? But my thinking was also that if we want them to be continuously making progress, I think only doing 9 semester hours in 4 years is not enough. I would be fine keeping it with the current language, but since this is kind of a policy question, I wanted to see what people's thoughts were on changing the first and second reissuance language.
Go ahead, Kath. Sorry, Dr. Rowe.
Thanks. Catherine is fine. So I just wanted to add some information on here on this content. So theoretically, students should go through a program. They may have graduated from a program and maybe they have completed all the coursework, but they might not have completed a certification exam, right? But the whole purpose of the DSAP, and Julian, correct me if I'm wrong, is to fill a shortage area in a district, right? So I hear what you're saying. I'm just not sure that it may not be relevant for those who have. I have somebody who graduated from a program who's still on a DSAP, even though he's graduated. So I just wanted to throw that out there in a case study for us to consider when we make this decision.
Thank you. Anyone else? Margaret?
Just want to make sure I'm reading it correctly because one is only if it's a condition, correct? So in Catherine's example, it would not be a condition for that person
Mhm.
because they had finished everything. And so then is there a recommendation from SDE staff about any changes to that section?
Mm-hmm.
Julianne?
So section 1 talks about, so a DSAP is required. If you're not certified, you need to be enrolled in a program to get a DSAP. If it's a cross endorsement, you're already certified in another area, you don't need to be enrolled in a program because it's a cross endorsement. So that's why section 1 talks about someone who does need to be enrolled, whereas section 2 is if it's not required, if you didn't have to be enrolled in a program to get the DSAP. So those are both addressed there. I think it's fine. I mean, and I'll let Kalen speak up as well. It seems to me like deferring coursework for the first or second reissuance, because now you're talking, you have the first DSAP, so then we're talking the second or the third is basically what it is. By the time someone gets to a fourth one, I think it'd be extremely rare that they wouldn't have completed the coursework. Usually it is because they haven't completed the testing, and that's what the additional time is needed. And again, maybe it's a case because especially if it's a cross endorsement, it might be 30 credits. It might just be a test, that they need. So I don't think it's holding them back to say, yes, you can defer. Like, I was supposed to take 9, but one of the classes was canceled, so I completed 6, but now I'm enrolled in the other. Like, that's fine to say, here's my reason why I didn't complete the 9, but I'm still working on the 9. By the time you get to a fourth or fifth DSAP, after that many years, I don't know why you wouldn't have made progress in your coursework. So I don't think there's any need to change that. I agree.
I agree with that statement. And I also want to say that if they're enrolled in a program, it's pretty prescribed how the courses are taken in a sequential order. So, and we want to make sure that the university is still supporting them in this program. So they would really have to be consistently enrolled in following a strict plan of study. That's just my 2 cents. So like the 9 credits shouldn't be an issue if they're enrolled, if it's a DSAP that requires a plan program.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Lauren, go ahead.
I think it's just important to note that the current policy around DSEP doesn't require enrollment in a Connecticut program. So we can speak to a Connecticut program having, a prescriptive plan of study, but candidates can be issued a DSEP if they're enrolled in an online institution in another state.
Mm.
So it's not like, oh, if they're in a DSEP, they're enrolled only in one of our Connecticut EPPs. That may or may not be the case.
Excellent point.
So It sounds like the consensus would be to just leave it as is and not touch the first or second reissuance language, and like you need to complete your coursework, and you know, makes sense. All right, so C for that regulation, it would be replacing best with Connecticut's induction program for new teachers. If anyone has a suggestion for a less wordy way to say this, where I got that language from is there's a definitions page in the regulatory language that says, you know, best is Connecticut's induction program for new teachers. So I'm using induction program for new teachers, but if someone has better wording to describe what best is, beginning educator induction program, that's a good one. Or beginning teacher induction program. I think educator might be more inclusive for, like, you know, you've got your school counselors are in here, so they might go under educator.
School counselors don't do best or team.
Oh,
That's why.
that's
So
true.
there's only certain teachers too that would do team, and there's categories. There's category 1, there's category 2, depending,
Mhm.
you know, category
Mhm,
1 teachers
mhm.
have to do 5 modules, category 2 teachers do 2 modules. So generally
Mhm.
speaking, our social workers, school counselors, speech and language pathologists, they do not complete the beginning educator induction program as it's written right now.
Yeah. So if everyone's good with beginning educator induction program, I think I like that. I think that sounds great. All right. So this was what we mentioned last time, where this was actually a priority. This was the language that I had mentioned that SDE staff had tried to put through, and then they were told, no, wait for the cert board. So we want bilingual education teachers to complete their coursework, but the language currently requires it all to be completed at one college or university, which could be a problem because what if your university is not offering courses? Or what if you move in the middle of your program and you now have, you know, 12 credits in Arizona and you can't get the rest of the credits in Connecticut? We talked about last time, there's a bunch of different reasons why limiting to no more than 2 would open the door for a number of people. And I did talk to people who were looking to get bilingual certified, where this prevented them from getting a bilingual cert. And to my understanding, they never got a bilingual cert because of it. Yes. So in section 428A4, this would be no more than 2 regionally accredited college or universities. And as a result, item 12 would have also needed to be updated. Would needed to be deleted. The section at the bottom, the bilingual educator deferral route, because provisional educator isn't around anymore.
Kristen, what would be the limitation in someone attending 2 or let's say 3 colleges? If they moved or a college closed, or if they're taking the prescribed coursework? Julianne is going to answer that. Thanks.
I'm just going to give you a little history. So when these regs were written, there was a big push that they wanted educators to complete an approved planned program that you could only get bilingual if you were recommended by a college or university. And so the compromise they made is, okay, fine, it doesn't have to be a recommendation, but it does need to be in one institution, because they wanted the consistency. They wanted to make sure you weren't just getting like repeats of some coursework. If you do it all through one university, there's a real flow and all the areas are being covered completely. And so that was the original intention. That's why it said 1 in the beginning. That was the compromise of not needing a recommendation. We want to extend to 2 because we have had a number of people who, as Kristen mentioned, like they start coursework and then they move. And so either that person has to go back to the previous state to finish the coursework at that same institution, or they have to start from scratch in Connecticut. And that's dissuading with bilingual being such a shortage area. You know, we didn't want to limit it. Now, it's true for any other endorsements, we say, oh, you could, if you need 30 credits, you can go to 10 different colleges and take a 3 credits at each. But I think you'll get more pushback from constituents who care about bilingual education because the details that you need in the training are very specific and they want to make sure that it's consistent and flows together with all the courses.
But are we creating a barrier then? I mean, if CSDE or we decide these are the courses that need to be taken and the student is able to demonstrate by way of syllabus, course description that they've taken that course that met those student learning outcomes, are we creating a barrier that doesn't need to be there? So
yeah, I mean, you can absolutely decide we're not going to set any limitation, but I just know, again, when this goes to the public, I know in the past that was a big deal that they wanted it in one institution. So I think we could probably stretch it to 2. If you say, oh, you can take them willy-nilly, I think you'll get more pushback from different groups. But again, that's your call to make. But that's why we only said 1. We moved it to 2. Was our suggestion.
I will say it's a nice, flexible and modernizing way of doing things. I know that, when I was taking coursework before, in grad work, some of those last courses aren't always available every single semester. And having that flexibility of being able to get it maybe at a different university and transferring that credit over really helped me to complete the work that I had to do. So when we're thinking about, making it flexible for our candidates and modernizing it, it feels like an easy lift to do in that way.
And I know that particular changing bilingual from 1 school to up to 2 schools, was suggested by multiple bodies. So I know that CSDE had suggested that. I know that, I want to say it was like, I'm trying to look it up right
I
now, but I'm
spoke to
not
our
going to
world
find it.
language specialist as well, who is involved with a lot of the bilingual programs, and ran it by her first before I even suggested it myself. So I have tried to kind of consider, different people's opinions. But again, like I said, you can try to push further. I just think you might get more pushback if you say no limitation to the school, but maybe not.
So then I have another question, which kind of leads to this. So some of the schools in the CSU system have shared programming. So do we limit that pathway by saying 2 schools, or are we talking about more than 1 program? So say, for an example, Central and Western have a shared program which leads to a certification. If we say 2 schools and then somebody needs to go to, let's say, Fairfield or Central, how would that look? Caitlin?
Kaylin?
Well, if it's shared programming, then each institution should have no problem transferring the credits in. If it's on, the same transcript and then we can see the continuity because it's shared programming, then it's a non-issue. See, some of the issues that we run into really sometimes comes at the university level because they don't want to accept the courses in as a transfer. So if the universities are on the same page, if the syllabi align, if the continuity to the coursework is exactly the same, then there should be an easy transfer option.
Great question. Thank you. We're coming on at 4:13, just to kind of give everybody a heads up of where we are in our timeline currently.
I did say that this one was going to have a lot of stuff in it.
Yes.
And we've done so much. We are like almost done with 4 documents. So the remainder of the things were just conforming to statute. So the ranges of academic for certification have changed from grade 7 to 12 to 4 to 12. So it's updating the regulations to match the law. That's for 449, 450. The end of 450, where it says departmentalized instruction, the reason that I think that should be removed is that world language is no longer treated like separately in elementary school. So this language is not necessary. 481 is conforming to statute, so grade 4 through 12. And then 539 is conforming to statute. So now it's, instead of kindergarten to 12, it's pre-K 12 for a special education certificate.
Thank you, Kristen.
So Madam Chair, I'd like to move all 4 documents. So that's allowed to sunset, recommended to sunset, reinstate it as written with an amendment to remove 445, the draft regulations as written, because as written, these highlights were not changed. Oh, sorry. And then with the amendment to replace Connecticut's induction program for new teachers with beginning educator induction program. So again, my motion was to move all 4 documents, so allow to sunset, recommend to sunset, reinstate as written with the amendment to remove 445, and the draft regulations with the amendment to replace Connecticut's induction program for new teachers with beginning educator induction program.
We would need a second to that. Margaret,
Second.
thank you. Any discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote with the exception of Patrice. She just got an update notification, so she can't actually say anything right now, but she will raise her hand or give us a thumbs down for hers on screen, and we will count that as part of the roll. So thank you. So Karen, if you want to go ahead and call the roll.
Sure. Dr. Rowe,
Yes.
Margaret Gustafson,
Yes.
Kristen Besega,
Yes.
Patrice McCarthy. Thank you. And
We
Jen
see that
Rodriguez.
raised hand and that smile, so that looks like a yes. And a yes for myself as well.
All right. Thank you.
Is that everybody then?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So those were the 4 items. I had stepped away for a moment. Did we go over the Educator Preparation Certification Board, the proposal to reinstate the transcript experience? Was that already discussed? Go ahead, Kristen.
It was not, but my suggestion for that would be, because we're out of time, would be to either move it to the next ad hoc meeting or move it to the next board meeting, because this was suggested as a legislative proposal. It might make more sense to go to the board meeting, and then when we look at regulation 412, in which this regulation for the transcript experience pathway comes up, then this ad hoc committee can look at the regulation and the board can look at the legislative proposal.
So it wouldn't go in for the October meeting because that material drops and agenda has already been set. Our next ad hoc meeting, based on when we are meeting, would be the 31st, which is Halloween. So we might want to consider changing that. And that would allow enough time, if we put that on the agenda, to have it on our November board meeting. Unless we call for a special meeting by the board and then we move it forward to a special meeting by the board.
Right, because it's a legislative proposal, I don't think it actually needs to go through this ad hoc first. Originally, I intended to have suggestions for regulation 412 done for this meeting, but then I didn't. So perhaps next meeting, I'm bringing in regulation 412, which is very long. And we can save the legislative proposal to just go over at that time.
Okay. This regulations ad hoc did receive that material. So my recommendation is that if they have any feedback, to maybe send that feedback or suggestions directly to Kristen for consideration. And she can make her proposal or send that when it's complete for board consideration as part of the November agenda, which would have to be 10 days prior to the November agenda. Or the November meeting. And our November meeting currently is the 10th of November for the board. Okay. If there is no other discussion or any additional business, then go ahead, Kristen.
Do we want to just change the next ad hoc meeting date while we're all here and can find a good time so that it's not on Halloween?
Yes, that would be great. Would a Thursday work, the day before the 30th, or is there a different day? The other option is that we move it up to, let me just pull up the calendar here. I don't think that the 24th would be enough time for us to get materials together for this board, which would be next Friday. So then the 31st is Halloween. Maybe the 30th. Would the 30th work for
No.
everyone? No.
I'm teaching.
What days are better for you, Catherine, in terms of teaching? Because that might help us narrow it down a little bit.
Fridays work. So I know that it's Halloween, but I mean, I'm okay on the, dare I say, weekend, but. And I'm doing a conference the week before, so that wouldn't work either.
Is election day more flexible for people?
Election day is very flexible for me. But I don't know about everybody else, which is the 4th, right? Tuesday the 4th. Looks like Patrice is saying no.
Did you say if you had, if you'd make changes, it would need to be presented by October 31st anyway, so it has to be before October 31st if you're going to change it. Otherwise, any changes you make would not be 10 days before the next board meeting.
The 31st is 10 days before, right?
Mhm. Maybe we could, maybe we could just do like a Google poll or some sort of survey and look at the 27th, 28th, or 29th, which would cut down on the time I have to prepare the next packet of things. But would just like a poll or something be useful at this point?
I think we might have to do that for the purposes of this. And then I think we might have to be flexible with, we had agreed to like 5 days before. I think being that we're moving the date, we might have to be flexible with the idea that it's going to be less than 5 days that we get the materials to review, based on the current circumstances. So why don't we do that? Karen, would you be able to do I think it's a doodle poll that we used to do, or a poll of some kind? That used to be done. I don't remember what SDE uses for their polls, but I remember Chloe used to use some kind of a doodle poll or something. But for those dates of the 27th, the 28th, and the 29th of October. And we will get back to you and see, what we have from there. In the meantime, thank you all for your considerable work and the knowledge that you bring to this and the discussion that happens here. It definitely helps us in preparing for the board meeting as well. These materials won't be on the October board meeting. They will be on the November board meeting. But Kristen might be giving a preview as part of the update on some of the things that we worked on today. All right. With that in mind, we had no public participation. I checked with Karen prior to the meeting. No one had signed up for it. So with that in mind, I would cater a motion to adjourn.
Catherine, motion to
So
adjourn.
moved. Thank you. All in favor? All right, let's, looks like that is a unanimous. So thank you all, and we will see you on Monday.
Thanks for your leadership, Jen, Kristen.
Thank you.
Thanks for all the great discussion. Appreciated.